It's late again. That quiet part of the night when the world goes still, but your mind doesn't. The house is dark, the screen glows, and you're here trying to sleep, or trying not to feel quite so awake. Maybe it's been a long day, or a long week, or a long year that keeps stretching in both directions. You've done what you could, and still your mind drifts to old words, missed chances, strange regrets that sneak in when it's quiet. Maybe you're holding on to something unspoken, a memory, a person, a feeling you couldn't name then and still can't name now. Maybe you're just hoping for something beautiful, something soft to keep you company in the dark. If so, you're in the right place. Let's go back, not to wars or castles or grand politics. Let's go back to something smaller, quieter, secret. Let's go back to the Middle Ages, where people still fell in love, still yearned and whispered and waited, and sometimes wrote letters they couldn't let anyone else read. Love letters written in code. You open your eyes to a candlelit room, stone walls, thick with shadow, a fire low in the hearth. You're seated at a narrow wooden table. In front of you, parchment, ink, a quill. Your heart is full. Your hands are shaking slightly. You've written letters before, but never one like this, because this one could get someone killed. She's the daughter of a merchant, and you're a lowly clerk. He's a page in the service of a rival house. She's already been promised to a man twice her age. He's sworn to the church. You're just someone who wrote something kind and meant it too much. You dip the pen in ink. Start slow. Not with "I love you," that's too dangerous. Instead, you write of stars, of weather, of the saints, but hidden between the lines, the real message. Maybe you reverse the alphabet. Maybe you change names into symbols. Maybe you write in Latin, but use only every third word. Whatever the method, the goal is, the same say what must be said without being understood. Because in this time, love is rarely free, and words have weight. A careless letter could mean exile, shame, a broken marriage contract, or worse. But still, they write. Because the heart has always been louder than the law. Some send flowers. Rosemary for remembrance. Basil for hate. Violets for modesty. Others hide notes inside books, under trays, in the folds of fabric. A few never send them at all. Just fold them carefully, tuck them beneath a pillow, and dream. And when the letters do arrive, the recipient knows how to read them. Because love, even in hiding, leaves clues. If this story is helping your thoughts slow down, helping you feel a little more still, you're welcome to like or subscribe, only if it brings you peace. There's no rush. We're in no hurry here. So tell me, where are you right now? Curled on your side, blanket pulled high, lying awake, replaying a memory that showed up uninvited, listening with one earbud in hoping this voice will soften something inside you. Wherever you are, however you are, it's okay. You've made it here. That's enough. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders drop. Let the heaviness of the day melt just a little. Tonight we'll drift through stories not carved into stone, but inked into folded parchment, passed from hand to trembling hand, a secret language between hearts in a time when love had to be clever to survive. Let's begin. You're lying in bed wrapped in scratchy linen sheets, staring at the wooden beams above your head. A candle flickers nearby, and outside the wind brushes gently against the shutters. Somewhere in the village a dog barks once, then falls silent. And in your hand you hold a letter. Not a normal letter, a love letter, written on a worn piece of parchment folded in a careful triangle, sealed with wax. But the words inside don't say what they mean. Not directly. Because this is the Middle Ages, and love, especially forbidden love, isn't something you write plainly. So instead you find secrets in the margins. It starts innocently enough. The letter opens with a line about weather, a prayer, a quote from the Psalms. But then your eyes drift to the edge, those fine strokes, running along the parchment border, barely visible. You tilt the page toward the candlelight, and there they are, tiny letters, pressed between the lines of scripture curling like vines. You read carefully. My heart lives in the pause between your steps, it says. I kiss the hem of your memory. You close your eyes and smile. In medieval Europe, people weren't just creative, they were careful. Love letters had to survive more than distance. They had to outwit chaperones, confessional booths, and a world where desire was often considered dangerous. So lovers became artists of ambiguity, turning every sheet of parchment into a battlefield of metaphor, every phrase a layer of concealment. Historians have found hundreds of these coded messages hidden in margins between the lines of psalms, prayers, and polite pleasantries. Many were found tucked into books, sewn into clothing, or folded into impossible shapes that required a certain touch to open without tearing. The cleverest letters, they said nothing at all. Just a flower, a name, a stain of rose water on the edge. Or sometimes they included riddles. What walks without feet, yet follows you always? And the answer, whispered behind closed doors, would be, my love. You wonder how many confessions were written on old music scores, how many glances across a courtyard were really the end of a carefully planned message. How many lovers carried entire conversations written on scraps of cloth, memorized and burned before dawn. You remember the story of a noblewoman who wrote to her betrothed from a convent, hiding her words in the margins of daily prayers. She used red ink, rare and expensive, to mark every fifth word of a psalm. Read in sequence, it spelled out, I wait. He never saw it. The letter was filed away by a suspicious abbess and eventually ended up in a library. Centuries later, a student reading the prayer noticed something odd. She pieced it together and realized she was reading the ache of a woman long gone. The ink had faded, but not enough. Historians still argue whether these coded letters were the product of genuine danger or just the thrill of secrecy. Probably both. In some cases, a misplaced phrase could lead to scandal. In others, it could lead to death, especially if your love was the wrong kind, between classes, between faiths, between those bound by other vows. So lovers became poets, and margins became lifelines. You stare at the letter again. Its center speaks of harvest blessings and the health of cows. But the margins say everything. You trace the final line with your finger. God watches the fields. I watch you. The candle flickers low. The room breathes around you. And you fold the letter back into its careful triangle and tuck it beneath your pillow. Not because you fear someone will find it, but because even now, centuries later, some part of you still wants to protect the secret. You wake to the soft clang of bells, distant, dutiful. Church bells, not celebration. It's a Monday or maybe a Tuesday. In a medieval village, time is mostly marked by obligation, not excitement. You roll over and think of the letter beneath your pillow. Then you remember this kind of affection, the kind whispered in ink, traced in margins, isn't just romantic. In your world, it can be treasonous. Love in the Middle Ages was rarely simple. Marriage was business. Vows were currency. Alliances were stitched not from hearts, but from land, cattle, and treaties. Love, actual love, was messy, disruptive, dangerous. So when two people dared to care for each other without permission, they didn't just risk heartbreak, they risked ruin. You rise from bed and pull your tunic tight, still thinking about that folded scrap of parchment. You've read it a dozen times. You've memorized its margins. You've smelled the faint scent of rose oil left behind. But if anyone else found it, if the lord of the manor saw it, if the priest guessed its meaning, you'd be questioned, maybe flogged, maybe shamed in the square. If your lover was a nun, a scribe, or God help you, a married noble, the consequences could unravel not just your life, but your family's. And this is why love letters were written in code. Because in a time when class lines were drawn like moats, when religion dictated not just belief, but behavior, and when women, especially noble women, were guarded like treasure, any step outside the accepted path had to be carefully covered. You think of the story Bertram once told, between treatments and herbal teas. A knight fell in love with the merchant's daughter. Their families despised each other, so they exchanged letters disguised as trade agreements. I confirm receipt of your wool, one line read. The wool referred to her handkerchief left under a bench in the chapel. The shipment was soft and true. That meant her reply had arrived folded beneath a loose stone in the courtyard wall. Historians still debate whether this was clever romance or simply poor business practice. But the truth lingers in the letters they left behind, coded, yes, but unmistakably full of longing. One parchment discovered in a monastery library contained a string of Latin prayers, but every first letter of each line spelled out a woman's name. The text was clean, holy, safe. but the acrostic told the story. Another, written in clean merchant script, was disguised as a shipping ledger. Item 5, barrels of sweet oil. Translation, 5 kisses as sweet as, well, you can guess. The act of loving in secret became its own kind of literacy. It required metaphor, misdirection, and the ability to say everything while saying nothing, because even parchment could betray you, especially if it fell into the wrong hands, and it often did. One young scribe caught passing a letter between a priest's niece and a local soldier was sentenced to 5 weeks of silence, not in a jail, but with his mouth sewn shut. They called it mercy. He never wrote again. You walk through the square now, eyes down. You see the abbess watching from the convent steps. You see the tax collector reading a list by the fountain. You imagine, just for a moment, what would happen if they knew, if they saw the code in your handwriting, if they guessed the truth behind the ink. The letter beneath your pillow isn't a poem, it's a risk. And you treasure it all the more because of that. You reach into your cloak and touch a different letter, a new one, still unwritten. You'll pen it tonight by candlelight in the smallest script your fingers allow. You'll talk of the harvest, the bees, the slow turning of the leaves. But in the second word of every line, you'll hide the message. I love you still. And maybe they'll read it, maybe not. But the risk, that sacred risk, is part of the love. You spend the morning walking the fields, pretending to care about grain. But really, your thoughts are on flowers. Not because they're pretty, though they are, but because in your world, flowers aren't just decoration. They're language. You bend to pick a violet, just one. You twist its stem between your fingers carefully, slowly. Because in the right context, this isn't a flower at all. It's a sentence. In the Middle Ages, love letters were rarely written plainly, but they were often scented, decorated, or accompanied by botanical symbols that carried meanings known only to the writer and the reader. If you couldn't write, I miss you, or I burn for you, in ink you might say it with a bundle of carefully chosen plants. Today, the language of flowers is mostly poetic, something you find in Victorian-era handbooks. But long before that, in whispered courtships and shadowed abbeys, lovers were already composing floral sentences, codes that were living, fragrant, and entirely plausible to pass as harmless gifts. You pause at the edge of a grove. Lavender, for remembrance. Rosemary, for loyalty. A single red rose, bold, almost reckless. But a dried white rose tucked into a page of scripture. That means I will love you forever, in silence. You pluck a sprig of thyme. In some circles this meant courage. In others, I am waiting. Back home, you place it gently inside a folded cloth, one that you'll deliver with your letter tonight. Not with fanfare, just left near the well, or inside the chapel hymnal third from the back. Historians still debate whether this language of flowers was consistent or entirely invented between lovers. That's part of the point. It only needed to make sense to two people. And that secrecy, that intimacy of shared code made the love feel even more real. There's a story told in whispers about a young noblewoman who embroidered flowers into a handkerchief instead of writing words. Her lover, a scholar, decoded each bloom. Pansy, think of me. Marigold, grief. Hyacinth, please forgive me. It was a complete apology in thread. They say he wore the handkerchief beneath his armor. He never returned from war. The cloth was found tucked beside a book of psalms, folded carefully and still fragrant. You let that image sit in your chest for a while, because when words were watched, the body spoke instead. A pressed petal in a book, a sprig of rue laid on a doorstep, a small bundle of forget-me-nots sewn into the hem of a dress. You once saw a letter where the only content was a single dried sprig of basil wrapped in cloth. You didn't understand it, but the woman who received it wept. You never asked why. That's the thing about coded language, it needs a key. And sometimes that key is love itself. Tonight you will write a few careful lines, talk of rain, of livestock, of a dream you had about a river, but you'll also include time. You'll include one petal of rose pressed thin so it lays flat within the fold. You'll trust that they'll know. You always have. The wind blows through your cottage window. You close your eyes and smell lavender. You don't sneeze. You smile. Because this isn't just a letter. It's a garden in disguise. You sit by the hearth that night, quill in hand, parchment unfurled like a secret, ready to be told. The candlelight dances on the table as you dip the nib into ink, thick, dark, unforgiving. There's no backspace here, just intent, precision, and maybe a little poetry if you're feeling brave. Tonight you don't write the letter straight across. You write it in a spiral, a perfect curl starting from the center of the page and winding outward like a snail's shell or the turning of a wheel. It's disorienting, impossible to scan quickly, and infuriating to anyone not in on the trick. But to the one who knows, it's beautiful. This was a real practice spiral. Letters were sent across medieval Europe, especially in times when privacy was more fragile than parchment. A spiral format made it almost impossible to glance at the message casually. Your eyes had to follow the entire journey from center to edge, or edge to center, depending on how the sender intended the flow. And if you wrote it too fast, too boldly, the ink would bleed into the fibers. Your thoughts would blur, so you slow down. The first words are about nothing, really. The grain stores are low this season. Then something about your neighbor's sheep falling ill. But then, midway through the curl, you start to reveal the real message. I saw your eyes in my sleep. I heard your name in the rustle of the leaves. Spiral writing was often combined with cipher techniques, substituting certain letters with symbols, numbers, or even Latin equivalents. Some lovers would hide their messages inside psalms, yes, but others turned to this dizzying layout to baffle anyone attempting to intercept it. Historians still argue whether spiral letters were meant solely to protect secrecy or if they were also meant to impress like a puzzle box, proving the sender's wit and devotion. One letter found in a monastery ruin was so perfectly spiraled, scholars say the recipient likely read it by turning the parchment slowly on a spindle candlelight, casting shadows in circles across the floor. You imagine that. How many flickering nights were spent decoding affection? You pause, dip the quill again. There's something meditative about it, the way the lines swirl outward, how your thoughts must compress, then bloom. You're not just writing words, you're designing a labyrinth, and the Minotaur at its center is your heart. And then you smile because even that metaphor is too modern. You're just a tired soul, wrapped in wool, trying to say I love you without being whipped for it. But that's the thing. You don't need to say the words plainly. Because in this world, cleverness is safety, and love is always coded. You add one more detail, a symbol in the bottom corner, a triangle inside a circle. It looks like nothing. But to your intended, it means meet me at the oak tree at twilight. You dust the ink with sand. Fold the letter into a tight square. Wrap it in cloth and tuck it into your coat. Outside the wind carries the sound of bells. Not danger, not warning, just time reminding you it never stops. You step into the night with the letter in your pocket, your heart quietly spiraling like the message you just wrote. Your boots press softly into the damp earth as you move past the edge of the village. It's quiet, but not silent. The night hums with the sounds of the late medieval countryside, an owl somewhere above wind threading through bare branches, the distant clink of iron as someone latches a stable door for the night. It all seems peaceful if you don't look too closely. But your mind isn't on owls. It's on your hands, one of them wrapped tightly around the letter you just wrote. The coded spiral, the tiny pressed time leaf, the secret symbol in the corner. It all feels like a gamble, like tossing your heart into the air and hoping it doesn't fall into the wrong pocket. As you near the old oak tree, your thoughts turn again to how many others have stood exactly where you are, under this very tree, or some other sanctuary of shadows, whispering words they couldn't say aloud. You slow your pace. Look around. You're not supposed to be here, not this late, not without a reason. And if anyone sees you, you'll need a good story. You're prepared to say you're delivering herbs, or returning a borrowed psalter, or simply couldn't sleep. But really, you're here to hide a letter. You reach the tree and find the notch behind the knotty roots. It's barely noticeable, just a natural pocket in the wood. You slide the folded square inside, careful not to crumple the time. Then you step back, brushing your hands, as though that simple act didn't feel like setting a trap for your own soul. Historians still debate whether these kinds of rendezvous spots were as common as the surviving folklore suggests. Some believe they're more romantic legend than fact, while others argue the consistency of stories about the third tree from the chapel or the stone ledge behind the bakery hints at very real, very practiced routines. Either way, the tree knows. You think of it like that, as a witness, a conspirator, and you wait. You lean against a nearby fence post and breathe in the cold. Think about how absurd it is, this world, where a simple piece of parchment can be more dangerous than a blade, where a flower means more than a word, where you and the person you love have to become spies just to say, "I miss you." But here's something they never tell you. In that danger, there's a kind of thrill, a charge in the chest that makes the cold more bearable. You smile, despite yourself. Because if love is war in this age, then secrecy is your armor and cleverness is your sword. After a time, 10 minutes, 20, you hear footsteps. Not loud, not rushed, just soft, careful, and too familiar to ignore. They don't speak when they arrive. Just glance at you, a nod, a breath, a look that says, "Yes, I am here, and yes, I know." They reach for the notch in the tree, take the letter and tuck it into their own coat, and then just for a moment, they brush your hand. Barely a touch. But it's enough. They turn to go as silently as they came. You don't follow. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. You wait a few minutes longer, letting your heartbeat settle. Then you turn back toward the village. And as you walk, you remind yourself, no one else saw. No one else knows. And the letter is no longer yours. It's theirs now. You wake the next morning with hay in your hair and a vague sense of dread. Not because you were caught, nothing so dramatic, but because nothing happened. No reply, no symbol scratched into the fence post, no pressed petal tucked in the market basket you share every Thursday. And that's the worst kind of fear, the quiet kind. You go about your day pretending to be normal, which is harder than it sounds when your heart is scribbling question marks on every thought. You chop herbs, you sweep floors, you nod politely at your neighbors and laugh when they talk about the upcoming feast. But inside you are reading every silence as rejection. Until near dusk, there it is, a folded scrap of parchment tucked inside the grain bin. It's addressed to no one, and yet you know. You unfold it slowly, carefully. The parchment crackles like dry leaves. The writing is elegant, and the ink is faded slightly, as if the writer was trying to make it look older than it is. Clever. The letter begins in the usual courtly fashion. Pleasantries, formalities, a vague reference to a fine mist over the fields. But then it turns. Line by line it sheds its mask. Beneath the surface, the metaphors bloom. I miss the way the hawk circles above the chapel roof. Translation: I saw you yesterday. You looked worried. The rose hips have ripened too early this season. Translation: my feelings are stronger than I expected. And then the final line: Let us pray that the storm breaks after the feast. Translation. Meet me again when it's safer. You read it twice, then a third time. You fold it and slip it beneath your sleeve. Historians still argue whether most medieval love letters were this poetic or whether it's only the most ornate ones that survived. But one thing is clear. Courtly love, as they called it, required a degree of artistry. Love wasn't just a feeling, it was a performance. And the rules, they were complex. In the medieval tradition, a knight might pledge devotion to a noble woman he could never marry. A lady might write rapturous verse to a man she wasn't allowed to speak to alone. There were no apps, no unsent messages, just metaphor meter and meaning hidden inside layers of appropriate prose. There's one famous example, a 14th century letter from a noblewoman to her lover that appears on the surface to be about falconry. She describes the bird's behaviors in elaborate detail. But to anyone who's been in love, the metaphors aren't subtle. When she writes, "My falcon no longer returns to my glove," she's not talking about a bird. When she says, "I long for the beat of his wings beside mine well," you get the idea. You run your fingers over the folded reply, still hidden under your sleeve. The ink is still damp in places. The writer must have rushed. That means something. And suddenly the silence of this morning doesn't sting so much. You go outside and stand beneath the same old oak tree, not to leave a message this time, but just to breathe. To remember that in a world of arranged marriages, wandering clergy, and very judgmental villagers, you have something precious, a language only two people understand, a way to say everything without saying anything at all. And as the wind rustles through the branches, you think, this isn't just hiding, this is resistance. The next message you send isn't a letter at all. It's a belt buckle. Well, technically it's a buckle that's been slightly modified. Inside the leather strap, stitched just beneath the outer layer, is a sliver of parchment, tiny, thin, rolled so tightly it looks like nothing more than a wrinkle in the hide. To the average eye, it's just an accessory. But to the right person, it's a declaration. Because in this world, everything can be coded, especially when parchment gets you in trouble, and spoken words might be overheard by the wrong set of ears. You pass it during a market exchange, all casual-like. You trade the belt for a basket of apples. You don't even touch fingers. No words, no nods. Just the rhythm of commerce, unremarkable and invisible to the crowd. This, too, is love. In the Middle Ages, clever lovers had to invent ways of smuggling secrets without using their mouths or even their hands. Messages were hidden in needlework, tucked beneath embroidery patterns, stitched in colors that only held meaning to the two who knew the code. There are stories, mostly half-confirmed, of women weaving messages into prayer rugs or lining the hems of cloaks with short phrases written in lemon juice, visible only when heated. Historians still debate how widespread these techniques really were. Some believe they were limited to upper-class courts. Others Suspect the lower classes were even more creative, simply less recorded. Regardless, you are now a part of that tradition. You walk away from the exchange with a small bundle of apples and a pulse that refuses to calm. The wind brushes your face like a conspirator, reminding you that you've just sent something that could change everything, or nothing, or both. And then you wait. Days pass, slowly, excruciatingly. You inspect every item left at your doorstep, every gift, every mark scratched into the wall near your sleeping quarters. You start to imagine codes where there are none. A misplaced broom. Maybe it means meet me. A burnt crust on the barley loaf. Perhaps a warning. By the third morning, you're doubting yourself. Maybe the message was lost. Or worse, maybe it was found by someone else. But then you spot it. Tied around the handle of your water bucket is a ribbon. Pale blue. Frayed at the edges. The kind of thing that could have easily fallen off someone's dress or been placed there deliberately. You look closer. The knot is a type of lover's knot, one used often in weaving two loops, intertwined so tightly they appear as one. To anyone else, it means nothing. To you, it means I understood. Love in the medieval world is not loud. It's layered. It's in the choice of thread, the positioning of a needle, the tilt of a bowl on a windowsill. It's slow, often silent, and sometimes more beautiful because of that. There's no rush, no typing bubbles, just the long, trembling pause between risk and reply. You untie the ribbon and slip it into your tunic heart, buzzing with quiet joy. And for a moment you imagine a different world, one where you could just say it, one where words aren't dangerous and letters don't have to be riddles. But then again, would it feel this thrilling if it were easy? You think probably not, because sometimes love feels sharpest when it's hidden in plain sight. Your hands tremble slightly as you sit by the fire. That night, the blue ribbon still tucked inside your sleeve like a talisman. The fire crackles, and someone nearby hums an old ballad about a knight who drowned for love. Of course they did. They always drown, or get exiled, or burned. That's how these stories go. You glance across the room and see your mother sewing her needle, moving in steady rhythm, her face calm and unreadable. You wonder if she ever hid words in a hemline, if maybe long ago she passed a message this way too. Historians still argue whether such traditions were passed down, whispered from one generation to the next, in kitchens and stables, or if they were born fresh in the desperate minds of the in love and out of options. Either way, you're not the first. The ribbon folded neatly now has already changed things. It's not just a reply, it's an invitation, a symbol that this code you've been inventing together is real, shared, understood. You have a language. You have a path forward. You have a rhythm. Tonight it's your turn to reply, but not with a letter. This time with bread. Yes, bread. You bake 2 small loaves, almost identical, except one has a tiny sprig of rosemary, twisted into the bottom seam, just visible if you're looking for it. And within that seam, beneath a layer of dough, you've slid a tiny sliver of parchment. It's not even a full message, just a drawing, a circle within a square. To everyone else, it's flour and yeast. To them, it says, I want a life with you, even if it has to be in pieces. You deliver the loaf yourself just before dusk. You knock Smile politely and say it's a gift. We had extra. They nod. Accept. Say nothing. But you see at the flicker of recognition, the thumb brushing the bottom seam. They know. In the medieval world, bread was more than food. It was a carrier, used to conceal tokens, coins, herbs, sometimes even messages. There are records of merchants hiding debts inside crusts of rebels, passing orders through loaves, and of lovers, quiet, clever lovers, hiding hearts in wheat. That night, you dream of flour dust and gentle hands, of kneading dough while watching a window, waiting for the signal, of living in a world where love is not hidden, not punished, not whispered through food and thread. But when you wake, the world is the same. Cold floor, thin blanket, but still your heart is warmer. Because when you reach for your coat there, it is another blue ribbon, this one braided with a strand of red. The answer to your answer, the wordless way of saying yes. You don't smile as you walk to the river that morning, but your face feels different, lighter, like the corners of your mouth might float upward on their own if you're not careful. You clutch a basket of linens because that's what today is for, supposedly, and try not to glance over your shoulder too often. The river is low this season. Stones poke up like the backs of sleeping turtles, and your boots crunch against the dry path. There are a few others already there, scrubbing or soaking, or just gossiping under the guise of work. You nod, greet, join. Your hands move automatically, washing the same worn tunic you've rinsed a dozen times. But your mind is elsewhere, because tucked beneath the bottom hem of a plain white chemise is a letter. Not a full one, just a line. Tonight beneath the elder tree. No signature, no flourish. But the handwriting is unmistakable. And the fact that it was sewn into the garment, even better. Hidden in plain sight past as laundry, it's bold, brilliant, utterly reckless. You rinse, wring out, hang the linen on the line, and let the breeze do the rest. Medieval laundry wasn't just about cleaning clothes. It was about exchanging messages. There are scattered records, usually buried in court cases or monastic complaints of clothes hiding more than just wear and tear. A hemline unpicked by the wrong person could expose a secret. A seam resewn with different thread might signal betrayal. Historians still argue whether these tricks were deliberate or accidental, but the patterns are there, stitched across time. That evening, you're already waiting beneath the elder tree before the sun dips low. The breeze carries the smell of the river and a hint of smoke from a distant hearth. And then you hear it, a branch shifting, a footfall not quite masked by the rustling leaves. They appear hooded, cautious, but smiling. The kind of smile that only appears after weeks of stolen glances and too many metaphors. No words at first, just the silence of relief. You both sit on the grass, not touching, not speaking, as if the entire world might be listening. Eventually you say, "The ribbon, red and blue." They nod. Safe and brave. A private code you didn't even know you'd invented. You exchange nothing physical. No kiss. No note. But everything is exchanged. A look. A laugh. The shared knowledge that the world may be watching, but it can't stop you because laundry can carry messages. Because a chemise isn't just clothing, it's a vessel for hope. Because tonight, beneath the elder tree, love breathes just loud enough to be heard by two. You wake early. The sky is still a sheet of cold gray, and your hands are already stiff with the ache of morning air, but your heart hums a tune no one else can hear. You go about the usual fetching water from the well, shaking straw from the mattress, buttering the bread that's more crust than crumb. But everything feels different now, like every movement might be a line in a poem you and your beloved are secretly writing together. The message you left yesterday pressed in wax beneath the handle of a pot was subtle. 3 dots arranged in a line. You're not sure what it means exactly. Maybe I missed you. Maybe I'm still here. Or maybe it means nothing but the act of pressing the mark itself, a silent fingerprint of longing. That's the thing about code. It doesn't always need a perfect key. Sometimes the very act of making it is enough. At the market, you see them again. No words. But there it is, a ribbon tied to their basket in a way only you would notice. Half knot turned left, looped twice. A shape that only exists because the two of you invented it. A message, not for the world, just for you. You don't smile. That would give too much away. But your breath catches. You touch your wrist, 2 fingers soft, and turn away. Love in the Middle Ages had to be careful. It had to wear a disguise. While nobles paraded their betrothals with music and wine, ordinary people learned to be quiet. The church watched. The village whispered. Even affection could be dangerous if aimed at the wrong person or timed too soon. So you learn to make language out of daily life, the way you fold a sheet, the path you sweep across the dirt floor, the sound of a bucket dropped too gently. Historians still argue whether such gestures were truly widespread or merely the fantasy of poets. But honestly, when you're in love, everything starts to look like a message. You receive a scrap of fabric later that day, tucked in a bundle of vegetables from a neighbor. No one else would think twice. It's pale blue like the ribbon you gave weeks ago, but stitched now with a single red star in the center. Not an actual star, just an asterisk of thread, 6 little lines meeting in the middle. It could mean anything. Could be decoration. Could be nothing. But you know it means I saw your wax marks. Your hands shake when you touch it. You press the cloth to your lips. Not a kiss exactly. More like a promise to keep reading, keep writing, In this quiet language you're both building, stitch by stitch, silence by silence. That night you light a single candle, just one. You place it in the window and tilt it slightly to the left. To anyone else, you're simply avoiding the wind. To them, it says, "I'm waiting." And then, before bed, you draw a small shape on your door with chalk, just a triangle, nothing fancy, but angled in such a way that it points downward, not up. Down means yes, up means I'm scared. Tomorrow you'll check their door for a reply. The candle burns low, and you stare at it thinking about all the ways people have tried to say I love you without saying a word. You've heard stories of girls hiding names in woven baskets of shepherds, carving initials into tree bark no one would ever find, of boys braiding strands of someone else's hair into their own tunics like a secret amulet. Most of it can't be proven. And yet, that doesn't make it less real. You believe it because you're doing it. You're part of a tradition of invisible ink of glances, held just long enough to mean something, of letters burned before anyone else could see. You're part of a history of quiet hope. And you know somehow that centuries from now, someone might wonder whether any of this really happened, whether anyone actually loved like this, sideways, careful, cautious, slow. And the answer, yes, they did. You do. The wind outside shifts. The candle flutters. You press your hands together like a prayer, but don't speak. You don't need to. You've already written so much tonight. In wax, in chalk, in the tilt of your window, in the tightness of the thread around your wrist. And maybe, just maybe right now, someone else is doing the same. You wake just before dawn. The window lets in the palest blue light, and for a moment, you're not sure what stirred you. Then you remember the dream, half love, half fear, and the way someone in it whispered without sound. The kind of dream that doesn't fade with daylight. You roll to your side and the stone is still there beneath your pillow. Smooth, flat. The one painted with 2 dots and a gold one in the center. You press it to your palm and sit up. The cottage is cold. The hearth has gone quiet. You stir the embers, feed them with a twist of straw, and breathe warmth back into the morning. As the fire catches, so does memory. The bundle of herbs, the secret signs, the message carved into the crust of a loaf. You smile even though no one is there to see it. The stone's message lingers. We are more than before. It's not a declaration. It's a beginning. In the Middle Ages, when rules wrapped around you like vines and customs, choked whatever grew wild, love found strange paths. Sometimes those paths ran through paper, but not just any paper, parchment made of sheep gut, scraped until thin and pale. You think of it like skin. It was expensive, which is why letters were rare, folded carefully, and sealed not with glue, but wax, sometimes scented, because even wax had meaning. A red seal meant urgency. A green one was often playful. A black seal, well, no one wanted that. And if someone sealed a letter with blue wax and pressed into it the side of a thimble, it meant one thing: meet me in the place where we last saw the moon. Historians still argue whether these codes were consistent or imagined in hindsight. But across borders and decades, patterns emerge, the same symbols, the same arrangements. People invent what they're forbidden to have. You gather a small scrap of parchment now, nothing grand, just enough. You draw an oak leaf, a candle, and a bridge. 3 things. They have meaning, but only to the right reader. You fold the parchment 7 times, an odd number. Lucky. Then you place it in the hollow again. This time you wait by the window. All day the market clatters by in the square below. You watch the baker's son chase a goose. You watch a knight's horse relieve itself beside a merchant's cart. All of it is ridiculous. All of it is life. But you don't move, because you're watching the moment time shifts. And finally, just as the sun begins to sigh into orange, someone leans against your wall. They don't knock. They don't call. They just rest there, one shoulder to the stone, then walk on. You race to the hearth. The parchment is gone. In its place, a feather, dark, small, from a blackbird, but tied to its stem, a hair. Not yours. You laugh aloud. You shouldn't. It's not safe, but you do, because that one strand of hair says more than any poem. You slip the feather behind a rafter beam. That night you light no candles. You sit in the dark and let the fire's glow breathe across the room. Outside an owl calls. You mimic it back. Once. Twice. No reply. Doesn't matter, because love in this era is made of symbols and patience and silence. Sometimes a letter wasn't even written. It was felt, passed through handkerchiefs, through shared water cups, through the brushing of fingers, as coins exchanged. If a woman passed a man in the market and dropped a glove, just one, and didn't look back, it meant follow, but not now. A man might cough 3 times while holding a hat, his signal that he had arrived. Historians still argue which of these were formal and which just romantic stories passed down by grandmothers. But it doesn't matter to you, because you're living it. You walk the alley at dusk. You pass the smithy and glance left, not at the door, but at the 3rd brick from the bottom. Someone has scratched a crescent into it, the same crescent you drew on your first message. You don't stop. You don't smile. But inside something quiet flares like kindling. In town tomorrow there will be a puppet show. You already know where to sit. Not in the front, not beside the loud ones, but 6 rows back on the edge beside the woman who sells ribbons, because the hem of her skirt will be lifted just slightly. And if it's lifted exactly 2 finger widths above the ankle, that means I received your last message. If it's 3, it means I want more. You spend the night imagining the hem, Love in code is exhausting, but it's also thrilling. Every glance, every object becomes loaded. A spoon left facing up on the tavern table. Yes, facing down number 2 spoons. Please hurry. A folded napkin in the shape of a boat. Meet me by water. A coin left heads up on a doorstep. I am safe. Tails up. Danger. Wait. Historians still argue whether this spoon language ever existed. Some claim it's folk legend, romantic nonsense. But people underestimate the cleverness of those denied their voice. And you're fluent now. You dream in symbols. You think in herbs. You write in glances. You trust the silence more than speech. And tomorrow, if the puppet show him says 3 finger widths, you'll drop your glove and not look back, because you'll already know he'll follow. The puppet show doesn't start for another hour, but you're already walking toward the square. Not quickly, not suspiciously. You're just another pair of boots on the cobblestones, just another traveler with no destination urgent enough to justify attention. Except, of course, you know exactly where you're going. You pass the baker's stall. Those sweet rolls with the plum glaze are almost criminally tempting. You glance at the ribbons hanging in the window of the seamstress shop, none of them in the color you're looking for today. You hum to yourself the same way you used to hum when you were 6 and trying not to cry. The show will be at the far end of the square, near the old fountain that no one drinks from anymore because of the frogs. Someone once said, the water made your hair fall out. That was probably a joke, but still no one risks it. You arrive, you lean on a post, you watch, and there she is, the ribbon seller, 6th row, right where you knew she'd be. You pretend not to notice her at first. That's the game. But your eyes can't help it. They flick to the hem of her dress. 2 fingers. 3. Then a breath held. 4. You weren't ready for that. Historians still debate whether these kinds of layered signals existed across regions, or if this was the kind of shorthand only forged in tight-knit communities, small towns, cloistered abbeys, private households, where glances carried more weight than sermons. But you're not in a library. You're not debating theory. You're watching the hem of a stranger's dress climb just slightly higher, and you realize what it means. Now, you don't move. Yet. You wait until the puppets begin their exaggerated dance, until the crowd is watching wooden heads bob under a velvet curtain. Then, and only then, you slide 1 pace backward, 1 pace left, and vanish behind the butcher's awning. You know where she'll go, the alley beside the tanner's, not because it's romantic. It smells like boiled leather and damp rot, but because it's forgotten. No one goes there except cats, rats, and tonight you. She's already waiting, not breathless, not trembling, just still. You don't speak. She lifts 1 hand and opens it. Inside is a scrap of wool, dyed red. Folded once. It means speak. You answer with your palm open too, but facing down. No. This is how it goes. You don't need language. You've moved past it. There was once a noblewoman in 13th century France who, was said to carry 5 colored beads sewn into her sleeve. Depending on which one she let show beneath her cuff, her maid would know which of her lovers to admit through the servant's entrance. It's likely apocryphal, but even if it isn't, you love the image. Today your message is simpler. You slide a coin from your pocket, place it on the stone wall. Heads up. Her fingers reach, not for the coin but for the side of your hand, the one gesture that means, I'm staying. It only lasts a second, but it's enough. Later, as you walk back toward your own part of town, you notice the strange light in the sky. The moon isn't quite full, but the clouds are teasing it with gaps and shadows. The kind of night that would make poets say ridiculous things. You don't need to say anything. The coin remains. The gesture remains. And tomorrow, who knows? Historians still argue whether coin language was ever real, whether the meanings we assign to objects today are just projections. But then again, history isn't always a record. Sometimes it's a whisper. Back at home, you find the message. It's not parchment this time. It's etched into soap. Who carves a message into soap? Apparently someone clever, because the message isn't visible until you wet it. So you do. The script appears slowly, bleeding through the lather. Let's not wait anymore. You stare at it until the words melt. Soap, of course. Tomorrow you'll find a way to respond. You already have the idea. Salt. You'll use salt and sprinkle it across the bench outside the chapel in the shape of a door. She'll see it. She'll know. Because when language is denied, people invent. When silence is forced, people sing in shadows. And love, well, love has always been best whispered. You light a candle before sleep, not for reading, just for presence. It flickers, it leans, it tells no one, and you drift off with soap on your fingers and the smell of ash in your hair. You don't carry the salt in a pouch. That would be too obvious. Instead, you hide it inside a hollowed-out crust of bread, small, stale just enough. No one questions a person carrying food, even less when it looks unappetizing. The trick isn't smuggling the message. The trick is making sure the right person understands it. You walk to the chapel before the bell tolls. The square is still mostly asleep. Just the sound of sweeping brooms and the occasional cluck of a disgruntled chicken. Pigeons inspect the world like suspicious tax collectors. You nod at one. It doesn't nod back. At the bench outside the chapel, you take a seat. You break the bread, careful, slow. You let crumbs fall naturally, like you're just distracted or thoughtful. Then comes the real work. With 2 fingers, you press into the crust and withdraw the pinch of salt. Carefully, subtly, you draw. A rectangle, then a dot in the center, then 2 lines above it. To everyone else, just spilled seasoning. To her, a door, a window, and eyes. It means you'll see me. You walk away without looking back. Historians still argue how often everyday items became code. Some insist this kind of signaling was more myth than practice. Others say the entire history of love in the Middle Ages was written in shadows and smuggled in lunch. You're starting to believe the latter. Later that afternoon, as you pass the square again, you notice a peculiar sight. The bench has been cleaned completely, except one pigeon feather remains, positioned perfectly where your door had been. You smile. That night, a knock comes at your door. Not a real knock. A pattern. 2 taps, 1 pause, then 3 more. You freeze. You've never taught anyone that code, but you recognize it. It's the one your brother used during hiding games when you were kids. He's been gone years, but someone remembered. You open the door. There's no one there. But on the step, yes, another stone. This one etched with a spiral. You bring it inside. Turn it in your hand. The spiral isn't just decorative. It starts wide and narrows in on a dot. You think of wells, of eyes, of looking inward. It doesn't mean meet me. It means tell me something real. So you do. You find your smallest parchment scrap and you write, I had a dream. I wasn't afraid anymore. Then you fold it and tuck it beneath the step outside. This one isn't meant to be found, but you leave it anyway, because sometimes just offering the truth is enough. The next morning you wake to laughter. Not your own, children maybe, or merchants. No, it's right outside your window. You open the shutters and find a single flower, a thistle, wrapped in thread. You pluck it and bring it inside. You don't even touch the thread. You know what it means. Your pain is beautiful. It's ridiculous, melodramatic, almost insulting. And yet you cry, just a little. Historians still argue whether symbolic flowers had standardized meanings. We know that later centuries codified them, Victorian flower language and all that. But even in the Middle Ages, certain associations floated in the ether. Thistle resilience, dandelion wandering, rosemary memory. You don't need a manual to understand it. You keep the thistle. You press it into your book of empty pages. The one you never use because you're afraid to ruin it. But now it has a first page. That night you sit in silence. No fire, no candle, just moonlight. You hear no footsteps. But the spiral stone has moved. Now it sits on your windowsill, and next to it, another coin. But this one is bent, slightly, as if someone struck it with the heel of a boot. That's not just wear. That's a message. Something's gone wrong. Your heart skips. Not panic, not dread, just awareness. The game has changed. Now you need to be careful. But even fear can be coded. So tomorrow you'll wear a ribbon around your wrist. Not a loud one, just enough. It will say, I understand. Proceed anyway. You wake up earlier than usual, long before the sun has fully climbed past the rooftops. The sky is the color of a bruised plum, soft and still yawning. You stretch without really meaning to, and find your fingers touching the ribbon still tied around your wrist. It's not as blue in this light. It looks like old ink now, faded, but it's still there, and that means you still remember what needs to be done. You sit up, carefully, as if the world might hear you moving and decide you've had enough peace for one lifetime. Today is the day you answer the stone. Wait, it said. But wait for what? You wash quickly, just your hands and face with water, so cold it bites. Then you head to the edge of town, past the market, past the blacksmith's place, past the fence where someone once carved a line of hearts and crossed out names. The woods beyond aren't deep, but they're just far enough to hide secrets that don't want to be found. You go there now. Each footstep feels deliberate. You're not sneaking exactly, but you're not strolling either. It's the kind of pace that says, I'm supposed to be here, but I don't want anyone to notice. When you reach the tree with the split trunk, you pause. You half expect it to be gone, to have closed overnight. But no, there it is, right where you left it, just above the buried cloth with the 3 hairs tied together. You crouch, touch the bark. It's rough and dry and smells faintly like the smokehouse back behind the abbey. You whisper something. It's not a word, just sound, just breath with meaning. And then you see it. A second ribbon, tied low around one of the roots. It's the same faded blue, but not yours. This one's newer, tighter. It means still here. Your chest tightens, but not in fear. It's something softer. Relief, maybe, or recognition. You untie the ribbon, pocket it, and leave a new one yellow this time. It's all you had. It means hope. Back home you boil lentils, slice root vegetables, burn your tongue testing the broth. Normal things. But all the while your eyes flick to the window, to the place where the spiral stone used to sit. It's gone now, but the windowsill remembers. That night another coin appears. You don't see who leaves it, but it's there plain as anything. This one has a hole through the center. It means look deeper. Historians still argue how sophisticated medieval lovers' code systems really were. Some say we've romanticized them too much. Others argue the subtlety was necessary, the only way women especially could express desire without punishment. But whether the codes were widespread or rare, they mattered to someone. They matter to you now. You take the coin and thread it onto a leather string. You wear it around your neck, close to your heartbeat, letting it feel every pulse. 2 days pass, nothing. 3 more, still nothing. Then one night on the 7th day, you find a loaf of bread outside your door. Ordinary looking, but when you break it in half, something clinks. Inside is a button, not sewn to anything. Just a wooden button with a red thread looped through one hole. The message is simple. Let's sew something new. You laugh, softly, almost guiltily, because after all the spirals, the ribbons, the warnings and escapes you're being asked to mend. You know what to do. The next morning, you go to the seamstress. Not to see her, she's not part of this. But you ask for scrap cloth. She gives you some offcuts, mismatched, a little stained. Perfect. You cut a small square, sew the button in the center. Around it you stitch a spiral, not neat, but intentional. Then on the back, you write with ash and oil, "I don't know what we're making, but I want to." You leave it behind the chapel beneath the old offering box. And wait. That night you dream. You're walking down a hallway lined with mirrors. Each mirror shows a version of you, but not just different clothes or ages, different truths. One holds a basket. One carries a knife. One is crying. One is laughing with their head thrown back. You stop at the one with the ribbon, and it says, "What are you afraid of?" You wake up sweating. There's another coin. Bent again. But this one has a thread tied through the hole. Blue and yellow, knotted together. A perfect little twist. And suddenly you understand. They're asking you to meet. Not in the garden. Not behind the chapel. Not even in the well. But in the market. In daylight. In plain view. Because hiding can only go so far. You spend the day thinking, sewing, breathing. Then when the sun is just starting to sink, you go to the vendor with herbs. You pretend to look at mint. And then she's beside you. No words, just presence. She brushes your arm. You both reach for the same leaf. And in that moment, it's not about spirals or seeds or coated ribbons. It's just two people standing close enough to know they're real. You pay for the mint. You hand her half, and as you walk away, you both smile. The mint leaf sits in your pocket, still damp from the morning stall. You take it out now and then, just to feel its cool texture and trace the veining with your thumb. It doesn't smell much anymore, just faintly green like the memory of freshness. But that's fine. It's not about the scent anymore. It's about the ritual, the rhythm, the thing you and she are building without even knowing what it might be. You still haven't spoken. Not properly. Just fragments, touches, tokens, looks that last a half-beat longer than polite. And it's working. Somehow. Each day now has a pattern. You rise, you walk, you pretend to shop, you pass her by. Sometimes she's looking at fruit. Sometimes she's just standing. But always, she's there. It becomes part of your body's internal time. Like breath. You begin to notice more how her braid always has one loose strand near the back, how she squints in her left eye, but not her right, how she always smells faintly of rosemary and whatever it is that keeps her from shaking when she's nervous. Historians still argue whether these kinds of routines, these silent coded rituals, formed the backbone of actual medieval courtship, or whether they're just what we now dream they might have been, but whether through constraint or care, this silence between you has become its own language. Then comes the interruption. A man you've never seen before stands next to her stall. He's tall, His boots are polished. His eyes are too sharp. You freeze. She doesn't look at you, doesn't give the signal. That's how you know something's wrong. You retreat. Quietly, but not far. You loop back around, pretending to be lost in thought, watching from the side of the candle vendor's stand. He's asking her questions about you. You can't hear the words, but you know. You know because she starts fiddling with the bracelet on her wrist. One twist, clockwise to counter. That means danger, watching. Stay away. So you do. The next 3 days you don't go to the market. You walk the long way to the baker. Avoid the well. Keep your head down. But you leave signs, small ones. An orange peel arranged into a spiral. A mark drawn into the dust behind the watermill. A scrap of cloth tied to the gate. On the 4th day, you return. Carefully, quietly. She's not there. The vendor says nothing, just shrugs. But there's a note tucked behind the mint pot. It reads, Chapel, midnight. Bring nothing, so you do. You don't even wear the necklace, just your shoes, your breath, and the steady hammer of your heart. The chapel is quieter at night than you've ever known it. The wooden benches seem too loud. The shadows feel full of breath. You find her behind the altar kneeling. She doesn't rise when you enter. You kneel beside her. Still no words. Then she leans in. There's no time, she whispers. They're moving me. You nod. She presses something into your hand. A rolled scrap of parchment tied with twine. You must not open it until the last frost. You blink. But what if... No. She shakes her head. It only matters then. You want to argue. Instead you say, how will I know? She smiles, but it's a tired thing. When you can no longer see your breath in the morning, but the ground still crunches underfoot. Cryptic, frustrating, perfect. You tuck the scroll inside your tunic, and she leans forward. For the first time she touches your cheek. It's not a kiss, but it holds the weight of one. Then she's gone. No more signals, no more coins, no more spirals. You spend the winter waiting. You chop wood with more anger than usual. You oversalt the stew, burn the bread. You think maybe it was all in your head. Then comes the morning. The frost is light, but the air is warm, and you breathe deep. No vapor. You reach under the loose board in your room, pull out the scroll. You sit on the floor, heart thudding, like hooves on stone. You open it. Inside is a map. No names, just shapes. A river, a tree, a house with a slanted roof. And 3 words, come find me. You cry, not loudly, just a single sound, deep and quiet and round like the inside of a bell. You pack a satchel, water, a bit of bread, the old button she gave you, and the mint leaf, because even though it's brown now, it still remembers. You follow the map. It leads you past the edge of everything you know, past the river that no one drinks from anymore, past the tree that got struck by lightning and never burned, past a stretch of field where they say ghosts whisper at dusk. You don't care, because she's real, and she's waiting, and maybe, just maybe, there's a new code to write, one made of sunlight and footsteps, and the way two hands can say more than a library full of letters. The path is unfamiliar. Your boots crunch on twigs that don't recognize you. The air feels newer here, like it hasn't been breathed as many times. You pass things that don't have names, only shapes, a crooked fence post like a bent finger, a rock that looks like a sleeping dog, a thicket that seems to lean toward you the further you walk. None of it makes sense, but it doesn't need to. The map isn't just lines, it's memory. Each turn you make feels less like you're deciding and more like something you once promised. You come to the river first. It's wider than you expected, but slow, lazy. There's a log, not quite a bridge, but not quite not a bridge either. You balance carefully across it. It wobbles. The water below gurgles like it's laughing at your fear. But you make it across. You don't look back. The tree is next, the one with the lightning scar. You stop here, touch the bark. It's smooth where it should be jagged. A sign? Maybe. You sit under it just for a moment. Let your breath settle. Let your feet remember they're attached to you. You eat a bit of bread, break off a piece, and place it at the base of the tree. It's a superstition, a habit, a hope. Then you rise. The field stretches out ahead, dappled with morning light. This is the part that scares you most, not because of ghosts, but because it's wide open, exposed. You walk faster, not running, just less slowly. In the middle of the field is a stone, flat, round. On top, someone has etched a spiral. You smile. She's close. You keep walking. Past the fence, made of bones, not real ones you hope, and toward the hill with a single tree at the top. It takes longer than you think. Your legs ache. Your lungs stretch. But you don't stop. Because the roof is there now, peeking just over the crest, slanted, just like on the map. You reach it. It's not much. One room, a chimney that looks half fallen. But the door is painted blue, faded. You knock. Of course you knock. Nothing. You knock again, then a creak. The door opens. And she's there. Not in a cloak. Not in shadows. Just her. Hair messy. Eyes tired. But smiling. She steps back, lets you in. The room smells like mint and ash and something baking. You say nothing. She says nothing. You sit. She pours you tea. Neither of you drink it. She hands you a piece of paper, not folded, not sealed, just flat. It reads, "Now we write it together." You laugh. It comes out broken, like something you forgot how to do. You take the paper, the pen. You start. First your name, then hers, then the spiral. This becomes your code, a new one. One built not on secrecy, but on choosing when to be seen. Historians still debate whether Love letters in code were romantic gestures or just survival tools, whether the people who wrote them were dreamers or simply desperate. But here in this little house on a hill, the answer is both. The days become softer. You plant things, not just metaphors, actual herbs. You argue over dill. She likes it. You don't. You sew curtains. She hates yours. You redo them. You don't leave notes under rocks anymore. You leave toast with extra honey. You leave a coat when she forgets the weather. She learns the way you hum when you're trying to hide excitement. You learn that she bites her lip when she's trying not to say, "I love you" too soon. And finally one day, you write it on parchment, in code, not because you need to, but because it's yours. It reads, "Spiral mint slanted roof, no ghosts home." You hide it inside the chimney wall, just in case. The seasons change. The frost comes again. You stay. Because where would you go? This isn't exile. It's return. One morning she hands you a ribbon. It's blue, faded. Yours. She kept it. All this time, wrapped in cloth, stored near lavender so it wouldn't lose its scent. You hold it. It smells like memory and earth and something like forgiveness. You tie it around her wrist. No message, just truth. You go to the river again. The log is still there. You sit on it this time, side by side. Watch the water that doesn't rush. She rests her head on your shoulder. And in that moment, without code, without parchment, without fear, you finally say it. Out loud. And she answers. With the same 3 words, but also with a smile. And a spiral drawn softly on your knee with her fingertip. Because some things don't need translation anymore. You don't write letters anymore. Not because you've run out of ink. There's always ink. But because the need for hiding has passed. Mostly. Still on stormy days, when thunder rolls across the hills, like barrels tumbling downstairs, you both find yourselves sitting near the hearth with parchment and quill, crafting messages you'll never send. One begins with, "If you find this, know I waited." Another ends with, "There are 12 seeds in the mint pot now, one for every time I thought I'd lost you." They're practice, reminders, rehearsals for the impossible. But most days now are ordinary. Bread, chores, laughter when the goat eats the laundry. And in these moments you find that the silence between you is still full, but not with fear, with comfort, like the pause between breaths when you're falling asleep next to someone safe. Then, one day a knock, not from her, not from you, an actual knock. You look at each other. It's been months since another hand touched that blue door. She opens it. A boy stands there, too thin, too polite. He holds a letter, no seal, just folded once. He doesn't speak, just nods and walks away. You open it. The handwriting is foreign, sharp angles, measured lines. But the message is clear. Someone has found the codes. Not yours, but others. They've traced them, matched symbols, connected names. And now they're hunting. Historians still debate whether these hunts were organized efforts or desperate scapegoat chases. But what's agreed on is this: once a code is broken, everyone who used it becomes a suspect. You burn the letter, not from fear, from instinct. Then you pack. Not everything, just the spiral stone, a pouch of dried mint, and one letter you wrote it on your second week here. It says simply, "I would choose this again." You bury the rest in the root cellar. She nods. No tears. She grabs the old map, adds one more spiral near the edge. New location, new code. You leave at dawn. This time through the back, the forest feels older, like it remembers what it once kept hidden. You follow animal trails, not roads. Drink from cupped leaves, sleep under nettles, but still, somehow you feel safe. Together. You don't talk much during the walk. What is there to say? Everything important has already been written between you, even if no one else could read it. One night around a smokeless fire, she finally says it. "I think we're not the only ones." You look up. She's not talking about love. She means the codes, the others. People who wrote in spirals and mint and slanted roofs. People who made safety from signs. It's a thrilling thought, and terrifying, because if others wrote, others were hunted. You reach the new place on the 6th night. It's not a house. It's a cave. Warm. Hidden. You light a candle. There are already markings on the walls. Not yours, but familiar. You trace one with your fingertip. It's a version of the spiral. Rougher. Older. But there. A confirmation you're not alone. She presses her forehead to yours. You sit in the dark, not speaking. Because silence now means something more than words ever could. In the days that follow, you build again. This time, not with wood, with stories. You etch lines into stone, symbols you both agree on. A whole alphabet of safety, of meaning. You place a sign at the mouth of the cave, a circle within a square. To the unknowing, meaningless. To those who read, here is a place of rest. Every morning you look for smoke, listen for dogs, but none come. For now, so you write. Not to each other, but to the ones you haven't met. You begin with, if you are reading this, you already understand. And then you explain the mint, the spirals, the pauses in conversation that mean more than shouting. You tell them you're not weird for needing to hide. You're not broken for choosing silence. You're not wrong for believing that sometimes love needs to be coded because the world is often too loud and too dangerous for anything else. And maybe, just maybe, they'll find the spiral and know they're not alone either. One night she brings out an old piece of cloth, unrolls it. Inside are tokens, coins, ribbons, a shell, each one a message she received from others, from before. You didn't know. She smiles, shrugs. You weren't the first to find me. You try not to feel jealous, but mostly you feel honored because she chose to stay. You hold up the shell, feel its ridges. It hums just faintly when held to your ear, and you think if there's a frequency to this kind of love, it must sound like this, not loud, not clear, but always there, waiting to be heard. You wake up to singing, not birdsong, though there is that too, but something else. A melody. Human. You blink. She's already sitting at the cave's edge. Back straight, voice soft. The words aren't in any language you know. Maybe they're not words at all. Just sounds that feel like morning. You sit beside her. Don't speak. The music floats into the trees. Eventually it fades. She smiles. Someone will hear it, she says. You don't ask who. You don't need to. Because something about the song feels like a code. One not written with ink, but with breath. And the forest holds it gently, as if it's known this tune for years. You spend the day carving new symbols. Your hands ache. The stone resists, but you don't stop, because someone someday will need to know what this place meant, how it held two people in safety, how it turned fear into ritual and silence into signal. That night, you find a beetle. It has a spiral on its back. You laugh. She does too. You don't keep it. You let it crawl back into the dirt, carrying your laughter like a message. Historians still argue whether medieval codes were practical survival tools or poetic acts of rebellion. You think maybe they were both. Maybe every symbol carved in a tree or sewn into a cloak was someone's quiet, I'm still here. Weeks pass. You grow vegetables. They're terrible, but they're yours. She builds a shelf out of driftwood, puts the ribbon there, the one you tied on her wrist. The color's faded now, more memory than cloth, but still it means something. Then one day there's a visitor, not knocking, just standing near the spiral stone, young, nervous, holding a pouch. You step out, say nothing. He doesn't speak either, just holds up the pouch. Inside, dried mint, a coin, a paper folded in fourths. He leaves it on the rock and disappears into the woods. You don't follow, you bring it inside. The paper reads, "Thank you. I didn't know anyone else was still writing. You and she read it 3 times. Then you tuck it behind the hearthstone. Add a symbol beside it, a half moon inside a triangle. It means acknowledged. From then on, the symbols multiply, not just yours, others, on rocks, bark, even painted on leaves. It becomes a conversation. No names, no places, just meanings. You build a second shelf, call it the library. She laughs. It only holds 5 stones. That's 5 more stories than before you reply. One morning you wake up to find she's gone, not far, just outside. She's digging. You ask nothing. You help. It's a garden, but not for food, for signs. you plant in the shape of a spiral. Basil, marjoram, mint, thyme. You call it the safe scent. When the wind hits just right, the cave smells like old letters and clean beginnings. It becomes a meeting place. You never see faces, but you find gifts, bundles of herbs, tokens, even small carvings, a pebble with your triangle half moon scratched in, a ribbon tied just like the one you once gave. It grows, without noise, without instruction, just understanding. Historians would call it a movement. You call it a garden. The goat dies, quietly, of age. You bury her under the mint. Mark it with a smooth rock, no words, just a spiral. Because some goodbyes don't need names, that night you both sit in silence, not heavy, just full. She takes your hand, squeezes, and for the first time in weeks, you both say it, still here. You think about the first letter you wrote, the ink, the fear, the way your hands shook. Now your hands are steady, not because you're braver, because you're not alone. You write one more note for whoever finds the cave next. It reads, "This place was built on silence and care. Keep both." You place it under the stone with the beetle, then cover it with herbs, just in case, just like before, but this time with hope. You start noticing the way the wind changes. It's not dramatic, not like storms or sudden gales, but gentle shifts that almost feel like whispers. A little cooler in the morning, a little slower in the evening. She says it means the season's turning. You nod, but you already knew that not from the air, but from the soil. It clings differently now, looser in your hands, like it's getting ready to rest. The plants don't grow as fast. The mint thickens but doesn't stretch. The thyme turns silver along the edges. She calls it the time of slow things. You agree because everything around you seems to soften, even the birds. Their calls are quieter. Their wings beat in longer arcs. One day you find a feather at the mouth of the cave, placed just so, not dropped, left. It's marked with dots, 5, then 3, then 5 again. You recognize the rhythm, a breath, inhale, hold, exhale. You leave a pebble in response, smooth, white, warm from your pocket. A simple line carved across it. The next day it's gone. A new one appears. The message reads, "We see you." You don't know who wrote it. You never will. But it means the system works. The garden, the signs, the patience. Historians still debate whether these networks were accidental or designed. You think it doesn't matter. What matters is that they exist, that people still care enough to plant messages instead of flags. She begins drawing again, not on paper, but on bark. She ties them with grass. Twine hangs them like wind chimes outside the cave. They make no sound, but they flutter when someone passes. You see them move, even when there's no breeze. One night a bundle is left just outside your sleeping area, wrapped in cloth, stitched with 2 spirals, touching. Inside, dried rose petals, a poem etched on birch, and a map. Not a real one, just landmarks drawn in symbols, a tree shaped like a fork, a river that bends like a question mark, and near the edge, a cave marked with a triangle. Half moon, yours. The poem says, "You're not the only garden." That phrase echoes in your head for hours. Not a garden, the garden. Plural. She reads it, then folds it carefully. We need to add to the map, she says. A whole world of safe places. So, you start. Bark by bark, you build a map of maybe. Places not yet seen, routes not yet taken, codes not yet read, but real, or real enough. It doesn't matter if anyone else ever finds them. What matters is that they're imagined, that they exist somewhere, if only here between you two. She smiles more often now. You do too. But it's a quiet joy, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that fills the room like candlelight, gentle, flickering, enough. One morning you walk to the garden and find a sprig of mint bent sideways, not crushed, curved, deliberate. It means I had to go. You scan the trees. No one, not even a breeze. But you whisper back anyway. Thank you for passing. Then you sit by the spiral bed and breathe. The wind carries time and smoke. A message, maybe. Or just weather. It's hard to tell now where meaning ends and air begins. You write a single line that night. Maybe everything is code. She reads it over your shoulder. Adds, underneath, maybe everything is love. You pin it above the hearth. Not with nails, with beeswax. It holds. Of course it does, because by now you understand that even the smallest things, sense pauses the space between symbols, are strong enough to carry meaning, strong enough to carry you. You've stopped counting the days, not because you've lost track, but because time feels different now, less like a line and more like a loop. Each morning folds into the last, like pages in a book you've read before, but still love. You wake to the same sounds. Birds wind through pine, sometimes the creak of the shelf. The ribbon still hangs there, its color almost entirely gone now, but the knot remains. Tight. Honest, you smile at it. She's already up, of course, always earlier than you. She walks the spiral garden like a priestess tending sacred flame. Each herb has a name, now not the real ones, but the ones you gave them. Courage, rest, whisper, keep. That one smells like smoke and honey. No one's visited in weeks, and you wonder if the network has gone quiet. But one afternoon, just before dusk, you find a note tucked under the smooth rock by the mint. It's small, tidy. It reads, "Still learning your code. Please don't stop writing. You don't know who left it. Maybe the boy. Maybe someone new. Maybe someone far away who just wanted to be seen." You place a symbol in reply, 3 dots in a circle. It means, with you. Later, by the fire, you and she talk about the early days, the mistakes, the silence, the fear, and then the symbols, the system, the shift from isolation to invitation. Historians still argue whether these kinds of systems ever truly existed, or if they're just romantic myths sewn into medieval letters and secret knots. But you know better. You lived it. You built it. You protected it. And now it protects you. The air grows cooler. Nights stretch longer. You stack the firewood higher. She weaves a new blanket thick, dark, soft as sleep. You add more carvings to the stone outside, not for defense, but for memory. A flower for the goat, a spiral for the first letter, a triangle half moon for the map. You don't speak as you carve. You don't need to. The wind does the talking. One morning she hands you a scroll. For the next ones, she says, inside are the codes, the meanings, the messages, but also a letter. It begins, if you're reading this, then the garden still lives. You add your own lines, then seal it with wax and place it behind the hearth beneath the other notes. You light a candle. Let the wax drip into a perfect circle. One last sign. That night you both sit by the fire, watching the flames curl upward. She leans against your shoulder. Her breath is warm. The silence is complete, but not empty. You fall asleep before the embers fade, and when you dream of spirals. The fire dims to a glow, not quite out, but soft enough that the cave breathes quieter. You shift slightly in your sleep, pulling the blanket a little tighter, as if your body understands that the night is longer than usual. Outside, the wind hums low through the trees, not a howl, not even a breeze, just a whisper. The kind of sound that doesn't ask for attention, but offers it anyway. The stone by the garden still holds its warmth, though the sun is long gone. Somewhere in the distance, a branch creaks and settles. Nothing startling, just the forest turning over in its sleep. You don't hear it, of course. You're too deep now. Not just in sleep, but in stillness. That kind of stillness that doesn't need walls or watches or windows. Just breath, just gravity, just the soft weight of rest pulling you gently toward the bottom of the night. And maybe, if you listen closely enough, you can still hear the spiral. Not with your ears, but somewhere deeper. The idea of it. The shape of a life that loops gently inward, toward safety, toward quiet, toward everything you didn't know you were building when you first carved a symbol into the dirt. But now it's here. And you are too. So, rest. You did enough. You were enough. Let the world keep spinning its silent messages while you drift, slow, softer, gone.